She stood up at my wedding, smiled at 200 guests, took the microphone, and called me a gold digger, my own mother-in-law, at my wedding reception, in front of everyone we knew, in front of my wife, in front of my parents, into a live microphone. And here's what nobody in that room knew. I had been sitting on her secret for 3 months. A plain white envelope, folded in my jacket pocket, carried there since 6 that morning, containing documented proof that the woman standing at that podium calling me a gold digger had quietly stolen over $1 million from a charity her dead husband built to send kids to college. 11 students lost their scholarships because of what she did. And I had protected her secret for 3 months because I loved my wife and I did not want this day to be about anything other than her. She just made a different choice. So I stood up, picked up my champagne glass, and I gave that room the truth it deserved. Don't go anywhere, because what happened next changed everything. And I mean everything. My mother-in-law called me a gold digger at my wedding, so I exposed her secret. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. I want to ask you something before this story really gets going. Have you ever walked into a room and felt, before a single word was spoken, that someone in that room had already decided who you were? Already written your story for you before you'd even opened your mouth? That was every family dinner for 2 years. And I smiled through every single one of them. My name is Garrett Cole. I'm 32 years old, born and raised in Dayton, Ohio. My dad worked the line at a GM plant for 26 years. My mom taught 3rd grade at the same elementary school from the time I was born until the year she retired. We weren't poor, but we knew what things cost. We knew what it meant to check the price before putting something in the cart. We knew what it meant to work for everything you had and be genuinely proud of that. I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina at 25 with a mechanical engineering degree, $4,200 in savings, and enough stubbornness to make something of myself in a city where nobody knew my last name. By 30, I was a project manager at a mid-size infrastructure firm. Nothing flashy. Good, honest work that I understood and was good at. I met Callie Hargrove at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue on a July 4th weekend 3 years ago. She was standing by the cooler in a yellow sundress arguing passionately about college football with 2 guys twice her size and holding her own completely. I handed her a cold drink. She took it without looking away from the argument. Won the argument. Then turned to me and said, "Thanks for the backup." I said, "I didn't say a word." She grinned. Exactly. I was done for. Right there. Hot dogs, an argument, and a yellow sundress, and I was completely, irreversibly done for. Callie was 30. She worked in non-profit fundraising, not because her family needed her to work, but because she genuinely cared about the organization she served. She was warm and funny and direct in the particular way that people who grew up with money sometimes are when they've chosen not to weaponize it. She never made me feel like our backgrounds were a gap. She never made me feel like I needed to be anything other than exactly what I was. Her mother was a different story entirely. Margaret Hargrove. Charlotte old money. Garden club, charity galas, a house in Myers Park with a circular driveway and a housekeeper named Rosa who had been with the family for 19 years. Margaret wore her wealth the way some people wear religion. Loudly, constantly, and with the unspoken implication that those without it were somehow morally deficient. From the very first dinner she looked at me the way you look at a scratch on a new car. Not angry exactly. Just disappointed that it was there. The questions were always polite. Always precise. And remind me, Garrett, your firm handles municipal contracts? How interesting. Delivered with a smile that said interesting meant small. Your family is still in Dayton? How lovely that you've made it down here. Lovely meaning escaped. I told myself she needed time. Callie told me the same. She's just protective, Garrett. She'll come around. She didn't come around. 3 months before the wedding, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. A document that landed in my email by mistake, forwarded by Margaret's personal accountant to the wrong address, mine instead of Margaret's. I almost deleted it without opening it. I didn't. I read it twice. Then I printed it, folded it into a plain white envelope, put it in the fireproof safe in my home office where I kept our passports and our lease. And I prayed, genuinely, sincerely prayed, that I would never need it. Have you ever had to bite your tongue around someone who made you feel like you weren't good enough, even when you knew your own worth? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear from you. The wedding was everything Callie had ever wanted and everything I wanted to give her. We got married on a Saturday in September at a restored plantation estate outside Charlotte. The kind of venue that made you feel like time had slowed down specifically for you. String lights through oak trees. White chairs on a green lawn. 200 people who loved us filling every seat as the sun dropped low and golden behind the tree line. I cried when Callie walked down the aisle. I'm telling you that straight because I'm not embarrassed about it. She wore a simple white dress. No enormous train, no excessive detail, just her, and she walked toward me with the particular certainty of a woman who has made a decision and is completely at peace with it. My best friend Danny handed me a handkerchief. I didn't use it fast enough. The vows were ours. We wrote every word. I said, "You are the first person who ever made me feel like where I came from was something to stand on, not something to apologize for." She said, "You showed me that love isn't about what you have. It's about what you give. And you have given me everything that matters." Margaret sat in the front row in a pale blue dress and a hat that cost more than my first car. She smiled through the ceremony. Appropriate. Controlled. I noticed her eyes during our vows. Flat, assessing, the smile not quite reaching them. The reception moved the way good receptions do. Loose and warm, dinner and dancing and the kind of laughter that fills old spaces beautifully. Then the toasts began. Danny went first. Perfect and funny. Callie's best friend Jess went second. She made Callie cry with 4 sentences and the whole room laugh with the 5th. Everything was warm. Everything was right. Then Margaret stood up. She was composed. Elegant. She accepted the microphone from the DJ with practiced grace and smiled at the room the way she smiled at every room. Like she owned it, because in her experience she usually did. She began warmly. She talked about Callie as a little girl. Curious, headstrong, always knowing exactly what she wanted. The room leaned in. I leaned in. Then she turned to me. "When Callie told me she was getting married," Margaret said, "my first thought, as any mother's would be, was, does he love her? Does he love my daughter for who she is?" I felt something shift in the air. "I'll be honest with everyone here," she said, "because I believe a wedding is no place for pretense." The word pretense landed like a stone in still water. Garrett is a hard-working young man. He has worked very hard to build a life, and to position himself well. A precise pause. I simply hope that what he saw in my daughter was my daughter, and not the life that comes attached to the Hargrove name. She set the microphone down, raised her champagne glass, smiled. 200 people heard every syllable. The lawn went completely silent except for the string lights swaying softly in the evening breeze. I felt Callie's hand go rigid in mine. I heard Danny behind me exhale sharply. I looked at my wife, at the color draining from her face, at the way she held herself absolutely still with the discipline of a woman trying not to cry in front of 200 people. I reached into my jacket. My fingers found the envelope I had carried there since 6 that morning. I stood up. 30 seconds of silence. 30 seconds of sitting at that head table while 200 people waited and the string lights swayed and the September evening held its breath. Callie's hand found my arm. Her grip was tight, not telling me to stop, telling me she was there. That whatever I did next, she was right beside me. I stood up slowly, picked up my champagne glass. The room tracked me immediately. Margaret saw me rise. Something moved behind her eyes. A recalculation. She knew me well enough to read my expression. She had simply miscalculated what I would do with it. I looked at her first, directly, without anger. The way my father taught me to look at a problem, straight at it, no flinching. "Thank you, Margaret," I said into the quiet, "for your honesty." An uncertain ripple through the crowd. A few uncomfortable laughs. "I'd like to add a few honest things of my own," I said. "If nobody minds." Nobody moved. Margaret is right that I grew up without money. My dad worked a factory line. My mom taught grade school. We checked prices at the grocery store and we were grateful for what we had. I paused, letting that settle across the manicured lawn and the expensive flower arrangements and the 200 guests in their finest clothes. I am not ashamed of a single day of that. Not one. A few people nodded. Someone near the back said quietly, "That's right." "What I am," I continued, "is a man who loves your daughter completely and without condition. A man who has never once looked at the Hargrove name and seen anything other than the woman who carries it." I reached into my jacket, removed the envelope, set it on the white tablecloth in front of me with the deliberate care of a man who had rehearsed this in his head 100 times and hoped every single one of those times that he'd never have to do it. Margaret's champagne glass stopped moving. "3 months ago," I said, "I received a document by accident. A misfiled email from a financial account I had no business seeing." I looked at Margaret steadily. "I almost deleted it. I wish I had. But I didn't. And what I read changed my understanding of some things significantly." The lawn was so quiet I could hear the creek running somewhere beyond the tree line. "I've held this for 3 months," I said. "Out of respect for Callie. Out of respect for this family. I did not want today to be about anything other than my wife." I looked at Margaret one more time. But Margaret made a different choice tonight. So I'm going to honor it. I opened the envelope. Here is what was in that document. Because the truth deserves to be told completely. The Hargrove family money, the old Charlotte money that Margaret wore like a crown, was not entirely what it appeared to be. Callie's late father, Robert Hargrove, had built his real estate business honestly over 40 years. A genuinely self-made man who started with one rental property and built a small empire through work and patience and integrity. He had also, in the final years of his life, set up a charitable foundation, the Hargrove Family Foundation, designated to fund college scholarships for first-generation students in the Charlotte area. He had funded it with $2.3 million of his personal estate before his death 4 years ago. What the misfiled document showed, detailed, dated, specific, was a series of internal transfers from the foundation's accounts into a private account registered in Margaret's maiden name. Transfers that had begun 8 months after Robert's death. Transfers totaling across 14 months, just over $1.1 million. The foundation's scholarship program had been quietly suspended 18 months ago due to, as the public statement read, a reassessment of funding priorities. 11 students had lost scholarships mid-program. I read every page of that document standing at the head table on my wedding day. The Hargrove Family Foundation, I said to the room, was funded by Robert Hargrove to give first-generation college students the opportunities he believed everyone deserved. My voice was steady. I was grateful for that. 11 students lost their scholarships 18 months ago when the foundation suspended its program. I looked at Margaret. "The foundation didn't run out of money," I said. "The money moved." The silence was absolute. "I have the documentation. I have retained a lawyer. The appropriate conversations will happen through the appropriate channels." I picked up my champagne glass. But I wanted the people in this room, the people who knew Robert Hargrove, who respected what he built, to understand that the man questioning my intentions tonight has some significant questions of her own to answer. I raised my glass. "To Callie," I said. "The most honest, most generous person I have ever known. Her father's daughter in every way that matters." The room, after one long collective stunned breath, erupted. Receptions don't stop for bombs. The music came back on. People moved. Glasses refilled. But the air had permanently changed. Charged and electric in the way air gets after lightning has struck somewhere very close. Margaret left within 20 minutes. No scene. Just gone. Her chair empty, her champagne untouched, her carefully constructed evening in ruins around her absence. Callie pulled me onto the dance floor. She didn't speak for the first full minute. We just moved slowly under the string lights while the band played something quiet and the evening air cooled around us. Then she said, "How long have you known?" 3 months, I said. She pulled back to look at my face. 3 months. Not a question. Processing. I didn't want it to touch today, I said. I didn't want it to touch you. Garrett. Her voice was low and careful. Those students. I know. 11 kids lost their scholarships. I know, Cal. That's why I kept the document. That's why I have a lawyer. She looked at me for a long moment, those steady eyes reading me the way she always did all the way through. You carried this alone for 3 months. I'd carry a lot more than that for you. She pressed her forehead against mine. Around us the reception continued. Danny laughing loudly at something across the lawn, Jess dancing with her husband, 200 people navigating the strange territory of a party that had become something else entirely. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. "Ask me in a week," I said honestly. "Tonight I'm just glad you're my wife." She laughed, short and surprised and real. Then she kissed me right there on the dance floor in front of everyone remaining. Danny whistled from across the lawn. I didn't care even slightly. What is the one thing someone did for you that proved, without a single doubt, that they truly loved you? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. The legal process began the following week. My lawyer, a quiet, precise woman named Andrea who came recommended by a colleague, reviewed the documents and made 2 calls within 48 hours. The first to the foundation's registered attorney. The second to a forensic accountant. What they found confirmed and expanded what I already knew. The transfers were real, documented, and legally indefensible. Margaret's personal attorney contacted Andrea within a week. The conversations that followed were not pleasant, but they were productive in the way that conversations backed by irrefutable documentation tend to be. What was not productive was the Tuesday night phone call. I was in the kitchen doing dishes when my cell rang. Margaret. Not through lawyers. Directly. I answered because I always answered. "You humiliated me," she said. Her voice was different. Not the social instrument I knew. Something underneath it. Older. Rawer. "You called me a gold digger at my wedding," I said. In front of 200 people. I was protecting my daughter. From what, Margaret? I kept my voice level. From a man who has loved her without agenda for 3 years? From someone who worked for everything he has? What exactly were you protecting her from? Silence. "You don't understand," she said quietly, "what it cost to maintain this family's position after Robert died. What I had to do. I understand that 11 college students lost scholarships," I said. "I understand that your husband built that foundation because he believed in giving people the opportunities he had. And I understand what he would think about where that money went." A long silence. "I did what I had to do," she said finally. "That might be true," I said. "But it doesn't make it right. And it doesn't make what you said about me right either." She hung up. I stood at the kitchen sink for a long time. Callie came in, took one look at my face, and didn't ask. She just filled 2 glasses of water, handed me one, and sat at the kitchen table. "She called," I said. "I figured," said Callie. "She said she was protecting you." Callie wrapped both hands around her water glass. "She's been protecting me my whole life," she said quietly. "From the wrong things. In the wrong ways." She looked up. "I'm sorry, Garrett. For all of it. For every dinner. Every comment. Every time I told you she'd come around." "You don't owe me that apology," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm giving it anyway." The foundation restitution was settled 6 weeks after the wedding. Margaret's attorney negotiated a private resolution. Full repayment of the transferred funds plus applicable interest, returned to the foundation's accounts within 90 days. No criminal referral, which was my condition. Not because Margaret deserved the protection. Because Robert Hargrove's legacy deserved to be restored without a court case turning it into tabloid material. The scholarship program was reinstated. All 11 students were contacted. 9 accepted reinstatement. 2 had already found alternative funding and declined graciously. That should have been the end of it. In a fair world, it would have been. What I didn't anticipate was Margaret's social circle. Charlotte Old Money is a small world. What happened at our wedding had traveled, carefully, quietly, through the particular channels that information travels in worlds like that. And some of Margaret's closest friends had apparently decided that the narrative needed adjusting. The adjusted narrative, which reached me through Danny, who heard it from his girlfriend, who heard it at a junior league meeting, was that I had ambushed Margaret at the wedding, that I had set her up deliberately, that the documents had been obtained improperly, that the whole thing was a calculated attack by an opportunistic outsider on a grieving widow. I heard this on a Wednesday evening and I sat with it for a long time. Then I made a mistake. I called Margaret directly, without talking to Callie first, without talking to Andrea first. I need you to correct the story, I said when she picked up. What's being said is not what happened and you know it. Garrett. I protected you for 3 months. I gave you every possible chance to handle this privately. And now your friends are calling me opportunistic. I cannot control what people say. You can correct it, I said. 1 conversation. That's all it takes. Tell them the truth. Her pause was long. The truth is complicated, she said. The truth is documented, I said. And I hung up. Callie found out about the call from Margaret before I could tell her. Margaret had called Callie immediately after hanging up with me, crying, saying I had threatened her, that I was using the documents as leverage, that she was frightened. The conversation Callie and I had that night was the worst of our marriage. You went around me, she said. Her voice was quiet, which was worse than if she'd shouted. You went directly to her without telling me. I know. I should have. She's still my mother, Garrett. Regardless of everything. She is still my mother, and you made a decision that affected her and our family without even telling me first. I had no defense. She was right. I had let my anger make the call that my judgment should have made. I'm sorry, I said. She nodded. Then she went to bed. I stayed on the couch. It was a long night. 3 days of careful, painful distance. Not silence exactly. We spoke. We were functional. We passed each other in the kitchen and said the right surface things. But something was pulled tight between us, the specific tension of 2 people who love each other and have wounded each other and are separately trying to figure out how to cross back. On the 3rd night, I was sitting on the back porch at 10 o'clock when the sliding door opened and Callie came out with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed me one without speaking. Sat in the chair beside me. We looked at the backyard, the oak tree, the fence, the neighborhood quiet around us. I owe you an apology, I said eventually. You already apologized. I owe you a better one, I said. I was angry. I felt like everything I'd swallowed for 3 years was sitting on my chest and I picked up the phone before I thought about what it meant to you. That was wrong. You deserved to be part of that decision. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I owe you one too. Cal. No. Listen. She turned to look at me. I knew who my mother was before you did. I knew her pattern. I watched her do versions of what she did to you to other people my whole life, and I kept telling you she'd come around because I wanted to believe it. She shook her head. I put that on you. I made you absorb things you shouldn't have had to absorb because I wasn't ready to stop hoping she'd be different. The oak tree moved slightly in the evening breeze. She called me this morning, Callie said. I waited. She didn't apologize. Not really. But she said. Callie paused. She said she knows she was wrong about you. Not those words exactly. But close enough. That's something, I said carefully. It's a start, said Callie. A very small start. We sat with that for a while. The coffee went warm in our hands. Garrett, she said. Yeah. Don't ever go around me again. Never, I said. I mean it. She nodded. Then she reached over and put her hand over mine on the armrest. Just that. Just her hand on mine in the quiet backyard. It was enough. It was more than enough. Margaret called Callie 2 weeks later and asked if she could come for dinner. Callie asked me first, looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Do you want her here?" I thought about it honestly for a full minute. Then I said, "I want whatever gives you peace. And I want her to have the chance to be better than she's been." Those aren't the same thing, but they can both be true. Callie called her back. "Sunday," she said. 6 o'clock. Nothing fancy. Margaret arrived 7 minutes early, which for Margaret, who was constitutionally incapable of being anything other than precisely on time, meant she had been sitting in her car down the street. She came to the door with a bottle of wine and a dish she had made herself. A lemon pound cake that Callie had mentioned once, years ago, was her favorite childhood dessert. Margaret had remembered. She had made it from scratch. I opened the door. We looked at each other on the front porch in the late afternoon light. Margaret Hargrove, pearl earrings, pressed slacks, the particular posture of a woman who had spent 61 years never letting anyone see her uncertain, standing at my door looking uncertain. "Garrett," she said. "Margaret," I said. "Come in." We ate at the kitchen table. Not the formal dining room, just the kitchen, the way real families eat. Margaret and Callie talked about Callie's work. I talked about a project my firm was finishing. We were careful with each other the way people are careful with something fragile they're deciding whether to trust again. After dinner, Margaret helped Callie clear the dishes, something I had genuinely never seen her do, and I stayed at the table with my coffee. When Callie stepped away to take a phone call, Margaret sat back down across from me. We were quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Robert would have liked you." I looked at her. "He was a Dayton boy," she said. "Did Callie tell you that? Grew up in a 2-bedroom house on the west side. His father worked at a Frigidaire plant." She looked at her hands. "I forget sometimes where we started. I've been maintaining for so long that I forget what it looked like before there was anything to maintain." I didn't say anything. I let her have the silence. "What I said at your wedding," she said, "was wrong. It was cruel, and it was public, and it was—" She stopped. Started again. "It was fear, dressed up as concern. I was afraid of losing her. And I aimed that fear at you." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry, Garrett." The kitchen was very quiet. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Not it's fine, because it wasn't entirely fine yet and we both knew it. Just, thank you for saying it. Because it was a beginning. And beginnings were what mattered now." She nodded once. Then Callie came back into the kitchen and looked between us, and something in her face relaxed. Just slightly, just enough. We had the lemon pound cake. It was extraordinary. I told Margaret so and meant it completely. She left at 8:30. I walked her to her car. At the driver's door she turned and looked at me for a moment. "Take care of her," she said. "Every day," I said. She got in. Drove away. I stood on the driveway in the September evening air, the same kind of evening as our wedding, golden and cooling, the neighborhood quiet, and I thought about my dad at that factory line. About my mom in her classroom. About $4,200 and a drive to Charlotte and a woman in a yellow sundress winning an argument by a cooler at a backyard barbecue. About what it means to build something real from the ground up. About the specific dignity of a man who knows his own worth even when a room full of people is questioning it. I went back inside. Callie was at the sink. I wrapped both arms around her from behind and she leaned back into me and we stood there in the kitchen light without saying anything because nothing needed to be said. "Hey," she said eventually. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Actually, yeah. I really am." She turned in my arms and looked at me. Those steady eyes, completely present, completely certain. The same eyes that had looked at me at an altar and said, "You showed me that love is about what you give." "Good," she said. And kissed me. Outside, the September evening settled into night. Somewhere down the street a neighbor's dog barked once and went quiet. The kitchen light was warm and the house was ours and everything we had was real and earned and worth every single moment of what it took to get here. I'm not telling this story to make Margaret a villain. She was a frightened woman who made wrong choices and is slowly, imperfectly, genuinely, trying to make better ones. I'm not telling it to make myself a hero either. I made mistakes too. Real ones. And they cost me 3 nights on the couch and a conversation I'll never forget. I'm telling it because somewhere out there is a person who has been made to feel small for where they started, who has been looked at like a scratch on someone else's expensive surface, who has smiled through dinners that were designed to remind them they didn't belong. You belong. You are not what you came from. You are what you do with it. And no one, no amount of pearl jewelry or Myers Park real estate or champagne glass condescension, gets to take that from you. Not at a backyard barbecue. Not at a family dinner. And not at your own wedding. If this story hits somewhere real, if you've ever had to stand up for your own dignity in a room that expected you to sit down, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. You might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.